It is my absolute honor and privilege to welcome you to WWTO Women and Wearables Edition. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Amanda Cosco, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a journalist focused on the intersection of fashion and technology, as well as the founder of Electric Runway. Electric Runway has a mission to bring you stories, expertise, and inspiration from the front lines of fashion tech. We are also invested in community building, so we do lots of events, including this one. And obviously, my investment in fashion and technology touches wearables, which is why you've seen me on this stage before. So before I get into my talk today, I would just like to highlight a couple events coming up that Electric Runway is going to be involved in. I'm going to be hosting Make Fashion on April 1st. That's this Saturday in Calgary, Alberta. If you haven't heard of it, Make Fashion is a high-tech, high-fashion runway show that asks audiences to consider wearable technology beyond the wrist. And then on May 2nd, we've teamed up with Startup Here Toronto, the City of Toronto, the Design Exchange, and Modiface to bring you in-store, an immersive event on the future of retail, and that's here in Toronto. So if either of those sound interesting to you, talk to me after the show and we'll get you hooked up. Now, on to today's topic, women and wearables. So it's my thesis, and I invite you to argue with me, because that's what we're all about here at WWTO, is dialogue. It is my thesis that women are emotional and social, but that's exactly what wearable technology needs right now. I think we're hard-pressed to enter into a conversation about women and wearables without first trying to define our terms. And I'm not going to stand up here and try to explain what it means to be a woman. And I'm not going to stand up here and really try to define wearable technology either. I think that it's a conversation that we have to enter into, understanding that the terms are slippery, what it means to identify as a woman, and what it means to talk about wearable technology in today's landscape, where that can mean anything as modest as a Fitbit to a fully immersive headset that puts you in a new reality. So we're entering into this conversation understanding that the terms are slippery, as I mentioned. But yet, there's never been a more important time to gather together. The Women's March on Washington was the largest protest in American history. And around the world, hundreds of thousands of women came together to rise up and say no to misogyny, say no to sexism. And I think that it's important that we take that message from International Women's Day, from the Women's March, and bring it back to our own communities, and that's really the impetus behind this event. How can we incite activism and equality in our own communities? Now, as someone who's interested in fashion, I was particularly interested in two symbols that came up from the Women's March. The first symbol was the pink pussy hats that were everywhere, and the second was the Future is Female t-shirt and slogan that resurfaced. I'm going to talk about the Future is Female t-shirt first. So this was a shirt that was originally made for a women's bookstore in New York. It was famously photographed by Liza Cohen on the musician Alex Dobkin, and has since resurfaced in this Women's March as a symbol of female empowerment. And the reason I bring it up here is to make the point that conversations of feminism today are in conversation with the feminism that came before us, in this instance, second wave feminism. The second reason I want to bring that shirt up is because it provokes the question, what does that mean the future is female? Where do males sit in that future if the future is female? Or perhaps, does it mean that the future could be feminine? And what would it mean to lead our businesses and our institutions with a more feminine approach? The pussy hats were interesting for me. I think that's the first time pussy has ever been said on this stage, so someone can tweet that. The pussy hats were interesting to me for two reasons. Number one, because they were a kind of viral symbol. Women wanted to make a visual statement, and the symbol of the pussy hats being everywhere throughout the marches were kind of a symbol for women's collective online activism. They were a meme. A meme is a unit for carrying cultural ideas, and normally when we think about memes, we think about internet GIFs and things like that, but I think that the pussy hats emerged as a living meme in real time. And what was also interesting to me about them is that they were knitted. And so they take something that is traditionally considered women's work, domestic activities like knitting and sewing, and repurposing them as symbols of activism. And so I think that can provide an interesting framework for our conversation today. So there was already a fashion connection to the women's movement. But as I researched it further, I was not surprised to learn that it actually went deeper. One of the main organizers of the Women's March is Bob Bland. She's actually now become the co-founder and co-chair of the Women's March. She's also a woman from my community because she is the CEO and founder of Manufacture New York. Now, if you haven't heard of it, Manufacture New York is a fashion incubator in Brooklyn with a specific interest in wearable technology, headed up by Dr. Amanda Parks, who is one of the most well-recognized creative technologists and chief technology officers in the world. And it didn't surprise me to learn that these women were involved in the march in Washington because from my experience covering the wearable technology industry in the last couple of years, women are leaders. The women in my community are leaders. They are organizers. They are also creatives. This is Madison Maxey. She's the founder of Lumia, also based in Brooklyn. Lumia has just been given a grant to integrate heated apparel into all of the coats and blazers in Topshop. So coming to a Topshop near you, heated apparel. And that's just in Brooklyn. Those three women I just mentioned, that's just in Brooklyn. If we go over to San Francisco, we have Kristen Neidlinger, who is the founder of Sensory, someone who is bringing emotion to wearable tech. Kristen is most known for her Mood sweater, which is a sweater that it reads emotion from the palm of your hand and translates that into color on the cowl of the sweater. And this is now being used in autism research. So someone who is taking what she calls extimacy, externalized intimacy, and making it a conversation in wearable technology. We can't have a conversation about women in wearables without talking about Anouk Vipret. Vipret is an internationally recognized fashion tech designer who gives new life to the female body through her connected couture. She's very interested in biomimicry, and this is her famous smoke dress. It's a dress that literally emits smoke when the wearer feels uncomfortable. So it uses sensors and she also has a spider dress, which you've probably seen before as well. But what I think is really cool about her work is she's not making tech for tech's sake. This is a new type of female expression, and it's very grounded in the female body. In Berlin, we have Lisa Lang. The women in my community are business leaders. They are CEOs. Lisa Lang is a stronghold of the wearable technology and fashion tech community in Berlin. She is taking concept and costume pieces and turning them into consumer products with the House of Electro Couture. And then here in Toronto, we have Ariel Garten, who you're going to hear from later on the panel. She is the founder of Interaction, the makers of Muse, someone who's bringing emotion and wellness to the conversation of wearable technology. We also have Kate Hartman, who you're going to hear from later, who is a creative technologist and the director of the Social Body Lab. They have a booth outside. Without Kate, so many women wouldn't be able to envision themselves in this world. Because of her leadership, they're able to. And then we also have in Victoria, Macaulay Wenner, who couldn't be here tonight but sends her regards. She's the co-founder of the Allel's Design Studio, somebody who's making 3D printed and laser cut prosthetics for amputees so they can have more of an expression with their disability. And then we have Yvonne Felix, who you're going to hear from later tonight, somebody who has been wearing technology for the last 4 or 5 years in order to be able to see. She also is the head of partnerships at eSight, as well as the heart and soul of that company, if you ask anybody who works there. So I bring all of these points up, and I should say, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. There are so many women that I could go on to name. We just don't have time to include them all in one opening talk. But I should say that we can get on this stage and we can talk about the discrimination that women face in tech. We can get on stage and we can talk about how women only earn 75 cents on the male dollar. And I think those conversations are important, but I think it's also important to highlight the achievements of women in tech and talk about how these women are successful, not despite the fact that they're women, but because they're women, because they bring their passion and empathy to the conversation. So I hope you enjoy the rest of tonight, and I'll see you later on the panel.